Good afternoon, everyone. All right, welcome to Georgetown Entrepreneurship Day 2012. My name is Jeff Reed. I'm the director of the Georgetown Entrepreneurship Initiative. And in conjunction with the MBA Entrepreneurship Club and with the Hoya Challenge, we are proud and honored to have you all here today to celebrate entrepreneurship. Here at Georgetown, our goal is to inspire our students to learn more and take entrepreneurial activities, to teach them the lessons that have been learned by those who've gone before them, to connect people, whether it's our students, our alumni, people from the business community, whoever we can connect in ways that are valuable. And then last, we hope to create new businesses and solve problems for society. So that's our mantra. It's inspire, teach, connect, create. And we're thrilled you're all here today to be a part of all those activities. We do have a variety of folks here today, from our current students to several alumni. We have many business speakers. We also have faculty and staff, many judges here for our competition. And then we're also going to have some prospective students joining us later today. So we've got quite a diverse group here today, and we're excited for all of you to be here. If you do want to tweet about today's event, here's our hashtag. And at Hoyapreneur, you should follow that. That's where we talk about all kinds of news related to Georgetown entrepreneurship. So with that, I'm going to now talk a little bit more about what's going on with the, well, let's see, you need me to get out of the way? All right, so we're going to do a little switch over here. So today is Entrepreneurship Day, but this is not the only thing we have going on. You know, throughout the rest of the semester and the rest of the school year, every year we have programs every week, whether it's a entrepreneurship chalk talk, where students have office hours with entrepreneurs and faculty, to our Pitch Jack programs, where you can pitch your idea to a panel of experts. You'll see a little bit of the Hoya Challenge today, but it is a program that goes on throughout the year. So we do have many, many things going on, and we hope you'll want to stay involved with us. So it's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Larry Robertson. Larry is one of our great entrepreneurial faculty members. He is the founder of Lighthouse Consulting. He has worked at companies like Walt Disney and JP Morgan. All right, and he started his own company quite a few years ago, where he works with lots and lots of entrepreneurs. He is also the 6-time award-winning author of A Deliberate Pause. He's going to tell us about taking that entrepreneurial leap. It's my pleasure to introduce Larry Robertson.
Thanks, Jeff. So I get the benefit, sitting down here in the front row, of looking up at this slide, which many of you may have seen the program when you came in, but maybe you didn't focus on the title. It's kind of an interesting title, don't you think? How to Take the Entrepreneurial Leap. What does that mean? Well, when I look at this title, which I have over the last few days, I think it's wide open to interpretation. And that is precisely the problem with this talk and this day. Not that you can see a title like that or come to a day like this and have different expectations of what you think you'll find or what you want to find. That's great. What I mean is that when it comes to a title like this, or a symposium that you're going to participate in today, like today's, or something like entrepreneurship, it is all too rare that any of us pause and think about the meaning behind it. What does that title mean? What does this day mean? Why do we not pause and think about why we do what we do? Well, in a way, the answer is right there behind the title. Because we're all juiced up and ready to take that leap, even if we don't know exactly what that means, even if we're not sure what that entails after we jump. So here we are, only a minute into this day, and we got a title that's open to interpretation. We've got the possibility that there are at least a dozen different perspectives in here on what this day means, what this talk means. It's even possible that some of you have come in here with the cart before the horse a little bit, even if you didn't think about that until now. That's a bummer of a way to start a day, isn't it? What should we do? I suggest we press on. And that right there is a good lesson on that entrepreneurial path anyway. In addition to pressing on, here's what I want to suggest. Let's go back to basics for a moment. I think there are at least two things that we can agree on going into the rest of this almost hour and the rest of this day. Number one is, I put it out there, we've got a title that's open to interpretation. So depending on your starting point coming in the door today, it could mean different things to you. And number two, this thing up here, this leap, this taking the entrepreneurial leap, may not be as clear-cut or as straightforward as you assumed coming in, or maybe as you'd like it to be. Fair enough? Those seem like two base conclusions we can work off to start. Okay, then my next suggestion is going to be forget the title. Just forget the title, at least for a moment. And in fact, what I want to do is, rather than leave you guessing, right up front, I want to give you several insights. We could think about them as guideposts. Guideposts for the rest of what I'm going to say, guideposts for the day, guideposts beyond that. I'll give those to you up front. No waiting, no mystery, no cost. And then what do you say we play a game? Okay? Okay, why not? Why play a game? Because it's fun. So here we go. Here's the first one. Taking the entrepreneurial leap is about a lot more than becoming an entrepreneur or starting a venture. Even if you want to do both, even if you're not sure you want to do either one. Now, it's right there before you, but I want it to sink in, so I'm going to just say it one more time. Taking the entrepreneurial leap is about a lot more than becoming an entrepreneur or starting a venture. That's number one. Number two, which I'll put up here in a moment, if you're curious about this entrepreneurial path, which I assume that's part of the reason you're here today, if you're curious about it, or you're thinking about walking down it, or you're already on it, stop right now. Stop right now and realize that there is not a literal how-to for how to do this. Stop looking for a formula. And that kind of leads us to number three, that wherever it is you want to go with this entrepreneurial leap, with entrepreneurship, with whatever, you have to take the lead. You're in charge. Whatever comes out the back end is entirely up to you, because entrepreneurship, your education, whether it's in one day or it's over several years, life isn't chauffeured. You have to be the driver. And there isn't a single person that you're going to hear from today, me, the wonderful panelists you're going to hear from, no one who's going to give you the answer. That is going to come from you. And the sooner you recognize that, the sooner you stop even subconsciously looking for a formula or looking for the answer to come from somebody else, you actually start to dip your toes in what's so great about entrepreneurship, finding your own answer. Sometimes it seems like the highest hurdle, but really, that's the plus side, okay? So, we've got 3 points here, and I just gave you a hint to the next thing. We've got 3 guideposts here, and in a way, we could stop right there. There's a lot in these 3 points, even if they seem straightforward. If you think about it, there's a lot to these points. We could even spend the rest of the time talking about this, but if we did that, we wouldn't get to that title that I ripped off the screen there, and its implicit promise of talking about this entrepreneurial leap thing, and we wouldn't get to that game I promised. So let's keep going, and let's play that game. Everybody ready? All the way in the back? Excellent. Okay, this is a very simple game. All I want to do is I want to show you a picture, and I want you to tell me what you see. That's it. Here we go. Shout it out. Jimmy Stewart. See, who said that? Yes. Okay. I know that no matter who the audience is, actually I've only shown this picture once before, but I'm just certain that no matter who the audience is, somebody will be able to play this game, look at this picture, and say what they see. This is Jimmy Stewart playing the role of George Bailey in one of the most enduring films of all time, It's a Wonderful Life. Anybody seen this film? Anybody seen it more than once? I'm guessing that the rest of you have at least heard of it. However, when I said we were going to play a game, I didn't say there were any prerequisites for it. You do not have to have seen this film in order to play this game of, let me show you a picture and you tell me what you see. Now, if you have seen this picture, you're probably predisposed to seeing certain things. You could not only tell me, hey, it's Jimmy Stewart, you might even say, well, I know where they are in this film. And for those of you who haven't seen it since at least December, or haven't seen it at all, let me catch you up here. They're standing in the Bailey Building and Loan. The Bailey Building and Loan is George Bailey's business, his family's business. Very simple what they do. They help people, neighbors, friends, their community to save money. And then they take that money and they loan it to other neighbors, friends, and members of their community so that they can borrow that money and build houses at affordable rates, something they couldn't do if they borrowed from the bank or they tried to save their entire life. That's what the Bailey Building and Loan does. So you could answer this question of, hey, here's a picture, what do you see? By saying, oh, well, I see Jimmy Stewart and I know where they are. They're in the Bailey Building and Loan. You might even look at this picture, which usually isn't the one used to highlight the film, and say, I know why they're there too, if you've seen this film. Let me give you that context as well. There's a lot of people on the other side of that teller counter, aren't there? Look at them all. That's one of the things that first stands out to me about this picture. Why are they there right now? Well, they're there because they've just learned that there's been a run on the local bank. This is late 1920s, early 1930s, right around the stock market crash. And they have just learned that the bank doesn't have sufficient funds not only to cover its own obligations, but maybe to give them their deposits back. And so most of them who have most of their savings here at the Bailey Building and Loan, they've come over to see if the same thing's going to happen. Are they going to lose their life's fortune? So, as we play this game of, hey, let me show you a picture, tell me what you see, if you came in here and you've seen this film before, if you're even familiar with it, you might be able to say, it's Jimmy Stewart, they're at the Bailey Building and Loan, there's just been a run on the bank. But as I said, there's no prerequisite to playing the game of, here's a picture, tell me what you see. Just like there's no prerequisite to taking the entrepreneurial leap. So what I want you to do now is, even if you've seen this film before, I want you to pretend you haven't. And I want you to look at this picture again, and I want you to at least think about what you see. And in fact, I'd like you to go a step further, and I'd like you to think about how you see. How do you see things? How do people in general see things? How do the people in this picture see things? And while you think about that, let me tell you a little bit more about why I chose this picture from this film. There are a lot of great things about this movie. There are a lot of things that make it enduring and endearing. But one of the best is something that's really not talked about, and yet everybody kind of knows it's there. It's the way this character, played by Jimmy Stewart, George Bailey, looks at the world. He looks at the world differently, and by choice, and on his own initiative. He does that naturally, but most of the film is about reminding him that that's exactly how he should look at the world. That everything that has happened in his life, everything that has made it a wonderful life, not just for him, but everybody he's touched in small ways and large ways, is because he looks at the world differently and by choice. So with that in mind, let me tell you what I see when I look at this picture. The first thing I notice, as I said before, is I notice all those people gathered there. I mean, first of all, it's a little unusual that they're all gathered there, but look at their faces. They all have almost precisely the same look. It's somewhere in the range of despair, confusion, panic, desperation. Remember what they've just learned. They've just learned that their life savings may not come back to them, at least at the bank. The second thing I notice is that, check out their eyes. They're all looking exactly the same place. They're all looking at George, and even if that's what they were directed to do, that's a pretty powerful moment. They're all looking at him as though maybe they hope he has the answer. Maybe they're counting on him to have the answer to what do they do with this information that they've just received. And that brings me right to George. He's not looking at the same thing they are. He's not even looking back at them. He's not even looking out at the camera at us. He's looking somewhere else. And the look on his face says that he's not only seeing something different, he's thinking something different. Now, What you have to remember about this film is that everything that occurs up to this scene, from the news that there's been a run on the bank to this very picture, all happens in about a minute. They look at the world, having learned just that news, and they see fear and maybe a dead end. He looks at the world, and what does he see? Hope. Because he says to them, just remember that this thing isn't as black as it appears. Just a couple minutes after getting this information, he knows nothing that they don't know. He doesn't have unique access to information. They see despair, and he sees hope. And a minute later, he sees opportunity. Imagine that. You've just been told that you might lose your life savings. To be able to see hope is one hurdle. To be able to see opportunity, well, the way he sees opportunity is because in addition to learning that there's been a run on the bank, they've learned something else. They've learned that another character in this story, Mr. Potter, the richest and meanest man in the town of Bedford Falls, has just made an offer to these people who are facing uncertainty. He said, I'll buy your bank shares for 50 cents on the dollar right now. You don't even have to wait to find out whether or not you're getting your money back. I'll give you money right now. And everybody in this picture is thinking about going for it. A sudden knee-jerk leap that they're going to take without pausing to think about what the meaning or what the implications of that might be, but they're following the path of better something than nothing. Everybody in this picture except George. George sees hope, and then George sees opportunity, and he says to them, don't you see what's happening here? We're panicky, and he, Mr. Potter, is not. Mr. Potter isn't selling, he's buying. This is an opportunity. He sees hope, he sees opportunity, and then he goes further. He's willing to place a bet on that opportunity that none of the rest of them can see. 3 minutes before this picture, 3 minutes before he says this, he's on his way to the train station for his honeymoon. He has $2,000 saved up in his pocket that he's going to spend on a month's spree with his new wife. He takes that $2,000 out of his pocket and he places his bet on what he sees in the future that could be better. He loans that money out to tie these folks over until the bank reopens. George Bailey looks at the world differently. Okay, so we've played a game. We've certainly gotten a little warmed up here, at least I have, pacing back and forth. And this is probably not what you expected, which is good. So now your minds are open to come back and look at this title. Why did I say, in so many words, that this title was problematic? Why did I say it was open to so many interpretations? Well, there are a couple of reasons, and I want to point them out to you because they're flags in general for you. They're flags for this day. They're flags for anything you learn, anything you do related to entrepreneurship or even entrepreneurial thinking. The first is those first two pregnant words up there. What are they pregnant with? They're pregnant with the expectation, whether it's conscious or not, that the answer is coming behind this. How to. Whenever you hear it, we're so trained, at least in this country, when we hear how to, somebody's going to tell us how to. Precisely. Follow the recipe. It'll come out the chute just like it's supposed to, just like the picture on the cover. How to. Those are problematic words. They get even worse when you combine them with this word or some derivative of it, because it's not a word we stop to think about very often. What does it really mean? And when I put the two together, all of a sudden, it's clicking in at least some of your minds that, oh, great, he's going to talk to us about how to be an entrepreneur, or he's going to talk to us about how to start a venture. Nope. That's not what I'm going to talk to you about. And those words, those unfortunate words, have cluttered up that one word that counts that's right there at the end of the sentence. This is what we ought to be focused on, that leap. What does that mean? Who can take it, and where can it take any of us? That's what I want to focus on for the rest of today, and the rest of my small portion of today. And what I want to do is I want to focus on 3 lessons that'll tell you more about the entrepreneurial leap and what it means, okay? And how you can decide to take it in your own way. Before I do that, I want to point something out to you. This is another picture that I thought about showing you and saying to you, hey, tell me what you see. But I'll save you that out loud thought process and tell you what I see. This is a pretty special place. It's special because it provides you with opportunity. It's special because it provides you with access to certain tools, whether you get those in the classroom or in a day like this. It's special because it has the potential to be a springboard to many things. But the key to remember about this place is it's not turnkey. You don't walk in here and get a how-to use the resources that are offered to you or what to do with them afterwards. There is no how-to here. And yet, not just because of titles like the one I started this talk out with, but in general, we're programmed to look for a how-to. We want to homogenize things down to something simple, something straightforward. Even this, we want to bring it down to, well, who's an entrepreneur? What does an entrepreneur look like? What do they do? Who's allowed to be one? The reality is, and I think you'll see it across the panels and the people that are represented on those panels today and the businesses that they represent and the concepts and the ideas, is that if you've met one entrepreneur, you've met one entrepreneur. That's the reality. So if we acknowledge the reality and we stop looking for the how-to, suddenly we become powerful. Because then we can think about those other things like, what resources are available to me and what can I do with those? Instead of, who's going to tell me how? Okay? So that's where I'm headed, and the lessons I want to focus on in taking the leap are pretty straightforward. Number one, question. Number two, get to core. And number three, relearn how to look. So let's just jump right in and do it. Let's talk about the first one, question. Well, to think about this, I want to put you in a certain mindset, and I want to do that by showing you a picture. This is a picture of the human brain. Each of you has one. Each of you is equipped with one when you come into this world. That's really a great thing. Do we know much about it? Yes and no, and some of us, but people have been looking at the people who carry these around and saying, what makes them special? What makes them unique for centuries? Well, Dan Gilbert, who's a psychologist and also the best-selling author of books like Stumbling on Happiness, he's done that too, and he said, you know, there aren't many things that truly, uniquely, completely make humans stand out, but this is one for sure. The human being is the only animal that thinks about the future. Not just instinct, like I know what's going to happen next, you know, fight or flight instinct and other things that would drive us forward. Lots of animals have that. Okay? Not communication. We've learned that other species have language. Not even the use of tools. Even that's not unique. But to think about the future. How might it be different from today? What's wrong with today that we'd even want to change it in the future? Why are things the way they are now, and how could they be better? Should we make them better? Who's going to make them better? Well, how can that happen? That is what makes us human. We think about the future, and as I described to you what that means to think about the future, what am I doing? Questioning. Question. It's core to who we are. It's something that we have to do. It makes us unique, and it's not something that's just available to a few of us, just like taking that entrepreneurial leap. The problem is that even though we're equipped with it, after a while we tend not to use it. Sure, when we're kids, we use it all the time. My kids sure did. Why this? Why that? Why not? We tend not to use it, and so we tend to forget to ask questions about the most basic things, the things we're told and the things we assume to be true. Pictures like this. I could ask you what you see in this. You might say any variety of things, but the chances are good that somebody in this room is going to say, oh, that guy looks like an entrepreneur. Now, the rest of you might be saying, I don't think so, or you might say, well, yeah, I guess I could see that. The reason so many people look at this and at least have that thought cross their mind is one of the many adjectives that are wrapped or clothed around this picture. Young, male, kind of clean-cut looking, has an idea, wants to sell it to you, probably after profit. All of these things are in that lexicon of adjectives and stereotypes around entrepreneurs. Now, you may not believe them. I'm kind of doing a random count here. Half of you at least may not believe them because he's male. And you may be sitting here saying, I don't think it's only the ground to walk on for men. Good. But there are so many of these stereotypes, so many of these adjectives embedded in our culture that even if you don't believe them all, they're affecting you subconsciously. They're affecting the way other people look at this. They're affecting the way people are going to respond to your ideas and your entrepreneurial thoughts. But we don't take very long to say, what does it really mean to be an entrepreneur? Here's another thing we don't question very often. The way we throw this term around. It's a label. We use it like a label. Sometimes we stretch it even further and we treat it like a job description. When was the last time you saw a job posting for entrepreneur? When was the last time you met somebody who started a venture and she handed you her business card and it said entrepreneur? It doesn't say that. It's not a title. It's not a job description. It's much, much more of a mindset. And the people who are using that mindset and applying it, they're not even thinking about the word. It's not a badge we take on and off. Here's another thing we don't question: where entrepreneurship can be applied. In business is typically where we assume. But that's not the exclusive domain of entrepreneurship any more than you have to look like that guy or you have to wear a badge that officially declares you an entrepreneur. This is all about questioning. And one of the basic questions we can ask is, how do we see? And when we do that, what it reveals is that whether or not you question brings you to a place where it's a question of your perspective on how you proceed from there. If you never question things, if you never even question the basic things, how are you likely to proceed? As you always have, as somebody has told you. Whether it's entrepreneurship or it's something else, we've got to change our perspective. We've got to flip the telescope around. Take a different view. Here's one reason why. We don't really care about entrepreneurs. Think about somebody who calls themselves an entrepreneur, or we call them an entrepreneur, who's failing, who accomplishes nothing, who never creates any value. Do we ever hear about them? Rarely, unless they do something really sensationally bad. We don't care about the entrepreneur. What we care about is the impact that they have. When they have impact, we start to pay attention. And the first thing we do is go running to see who did that, and assume that it's one person. And assume that you can profile that person to say, if I'm just like that person, him or her, I could be an entrepreneur too. Why aren't we looking at the other end, at the impact, and saying, where did that come from? How many people did it come from? How many ideas did it come from? Not just where did it start, but what happened along the way. That's questioning, and that's shifting our perspective. And that kind of thinking gets us to lesson 2, which is through questioning, we can get to what's core. I want to tell you a story to tell you what I mean by getting to core. In the 1980s, way back in the dark ages, America, or at least American business, was very fixated on Japan and the Japanese. Why? Because they were having enormous success. And we wanted some of that. Why are they being so successful and we aren't? That's what we wanted to know, was why. And so what did we immediately look at? What? We looked at what? What are they doing that's different from us? We looked in their manufacturing systems and processes, just-in-time manufacturing, automation, before we were even willing or brave enough to try it here in most places. We looked at what they were producing, using lots of technology, building it into products we wouldn't have even thought of. They were doing all these really, really creative things, and we were fixated on what? Not the Japanese. They were fixated on how. How do we decide what we're going to build? How do we decide how we're going to grow our economy? How do we decide what businesses we're going to build around what ideas? And really, at the end of the day, they weren't even focused on how. Like Toyota, they were focused on why. This is the Toyota symbol, if you're not familiar with it. Toyota used to have a reputation for asking the 7 layers of why. Here's what that meant. It meant, first of all, that they believed you better know why you do something. Everybody who works in your company ought to know why they do what they do and why the company as a whole does that. And you got to keep asking that question in 2 ways. When you ask it the first time, whatever your answer is, if I say to you, why did you wear those boots today? And you say, because they fit my feet snugly, I should then say to your answer, well, why? Why do they fit your feet snugly and not your other shoes or not the person next to you? And whatever the answer is to that, you say, why that and why that? And so the belief at Toyota at the time was, if you can get down to 7 layers of why, you're to core. You're to what really matters. Everything above that has some level of fluff. And once you know what's core, you can build back with what's important and forget what's irrelevant. Okay? The other way they thought you should ask why all the time was you should keep asking it. There isn't just one answer that lasts for all time. You've got to keep answering. So what they were trying to do was get to core. And that's what resulted in the whats that they did. But as they asked it, they changed those things. They changed the way they manufactured things. They changed the products they did because they kept asking why. They were trying to get to core. Now, you do not have to go ask 7 layers of why if you don't want to. There's more than one way to get to core, more than one way to take this lesson in the entrepreneurial leap. And one way to do that is to go back to the first lesson. Just ask questions. Ask basic questions. And I've been planting one in your head since we started. One basic question we never ask. Why are we here? Why are you here in this room right now? Because it sounded like a cool event, so you just signed up and didn't think any further? Because your friends were going? Because suddenly you had a cancellation and you could make it today? My guess is most of you did not give that a lot of thought. It doesn't mean that there's no meaning to it, but if you haven't gotten down to the core reasons for why you do what you do, you're missing something. So even by asking simple questions like this, you can get yourself down to the core of what matters. Let me pull you back from that and give you another movie reference. One of my favorite books of all time is To Kill a Mockingbird. It's one of the few books that actually translated well into a movie. And a lot of that was due to this guy. This is Gregory Peck playing the lead character of Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. Now, like my game earlier, you don't have to have seen this movie to understand what I'm about to share with you or have it mean something to you. You don't have to have read To Kill a Mockingbird, but if you haven't, you should rush to your local bookstore or e-book store and read it. Here's the point of the book. A lot of people focus on this book because of where it's set and when it's set. It's set in the South in the middle of the last century in a small town where things are beginning to change. And a lot of the story is portrayed through 2 characters, Atticus Finch and his 9-year-old daughter, Scout. Scout looks at the world in the rawest, truest way possible. She sees what is, and she can't always match it up with what other people do and say and how they behave. She sees it raw, she spits it out raw. Atticus sees the world that same way too, but Atticus has learned how to filter that. He's learned how to take what he sees and to get it down to the truth and then know how to build back for his interactions with other people and the things he decides to do. And this is the advice he gives to Scout. Not gives to Scout to say, do it the way I do it, but to say, you figure out what works for you. You figure out your own how-to. He says to her, Scout, delete the adjectives and you'll have the facts. Delete the adjectives and you'll have the... What simple advice? Take anything. Take a car commercial. Take a pitch that you hear, maybe even today. Delete the adjectives and you'll have the facts. But how often do we follow that? I'll tell you, this is one place where we don't do that, and we should. Most of us make assumptions about what this term means in general, to us, to whoever will hear our brilliant idea if we come up with one, and we forget that it's all cluttered up with all these adjectives and all this meaning that we put it behind it in different ways, and I could keep going and fill the entire screen with it. But if I delete the adjectives, I get to the fact and I get to core. Here's the core. This is what this term originally meant. An entrepreneur is one who undertakes. Entrepreneurship is the act of undertaking. That's it. There's nothing layered on top of that yet. No specific industry, no business, no specific form of value, profit. Nothing is set in stone. To undertake. It means it was created to describe people who looked out into the world and they saw something the rest of us didn't, maybe a little Jimmy Stewart-like. They saw something that was so worth having, so valuable that it had to be realized. They looked around and saw nobody else was doing it. They had to do it. And so they chose to undertake and commit themselves at the level of making it themselves the guarantee that it would happen. That's what this word means. Anything you layer on top of that should be your choice. Anything that's layered on top of that that you haven't stripped away, you haven't gotten to core to think about what this means to you. So let's get to lesson 3. You have to relearn how to look. You're going to teach yourselves this lesson because I'm going to show you another picture. What I want you to do is think about the first time you looked through one of these, a microscope. Set yourself back in that time. Close your eyes if it helps. Back in high school, junior high. Maybe it was when your parents gave you a chemistry set. I don't know. Think about the first time that you looked through at a microscope. Wasn't it amazing what you saw? So different from anything you'd ever seen. Keep that picture in your head. And let me tell you something that's obvious about a microscope, but we never stop to think about it. A microscope is an incredibly powerful tool. It allows us to focus as we've never focused before. It allows us to look at the world right in front of us and see things that we didn't even realize were there. And when we see those things, we have an understanding of what we could do with them and what could be, how we might take those things and change the future in some way. It's an incredibly powerful tool once you learn how to look. Still have that image in your head, what you saw the first time you looked through a microscope, some of you at least? I'm going to tell you, initially disappointing, but it gets better, that what you remember first seeing, for most of you, is not what you first saw. The reason that's true is that most of us had heard so much excitement about a microscope, we couldn't wait to look at it, so we rushed forward and we looked through the microscope and we didn't see anything because we all made that fatal mistake. Anybody know what it is? Focus is good suggestion. Something else, even before that. Say it again? Oh, that's a good one. Didn't turn on the light? Nope. Let me give you a hint. She's not making the mistake. Exactly. If you put your eye right on the lens, if you rush in and forget to step back, you don't see the wonder. When I talk about relearning how to look, what I'm suggesting is that you look at everything differently. Go back to a time when you were enticed and drawn in by the wonder you knew you were going to see, even though you didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. It takes some work to relearn to look at the world that way over and over and over again. But when you do, it gives you a different perspective on a picture like this. Rather than looking at this and saying, well, which one's the entrepreneur? Who's allowed to be an entrepreneur? You're going to see something different, because I certainly wouldn't want to place the bet here. Let's look at it a different way to say, which one of these people isn't allowed to take that entrepreneurial leap? Which of these people up here is not allowed to question? Which of these people is not allowed to question to the point that we get down to core assumptions and core beliefs and things like that? Which of these people can't learn how to look at the world differently? I don't think there's a single one up there. And it's really important because, as it turns out, we slip into this pattern with so much information out there, with so many choices, with so many things to do. Our beliefs get set. That's a natural part of us too. We come up with these mind maps or filters for how we get to answers differently, but we very rarely go back and challenge our beliefs. And a lot of what we believe is what we're told by other people. And what we're told by other people can't possibly always be the truth, because how what we're told applies to us or to different situations changes with time. But belief can freeze capacity, like the belief of who's allowed to be an entrepreneur, who's allowed to pursue entrepreneurship. Forget that. How about who's allowed to assume an entrepreneurial mindset? Who's allowed to take that leap? That then could shift our belief from things like this, that only some of us are allowed to be entrepreneurs or creative, and the rest of us can't, when the reality is that the rest of us have either been wrongly told that we can, or we've arrived at that conclusion ourselves, and it's simply not true, because we're all capable of taking that entrepreneurial leap, no matter where we go from there. So if you think about that, if you question, if you get to core, if you look differently, then belief can free capacity as well. And really anything's possible from there. So, who cares? Who cares? I didn't tell you how to be an entrepreneur today. I didn't tell you how to start a venture. I told you about something much bigger and way before that. But who cares? Let me give you 3 different answers to the so what or the who cares. The first answer I've already given you. We are a species that thinks about the future. We are a species that very naturally questions. We are a species that whether we do it consciously or train ourselves to do it more often and deeper, we think about why things are the way they are and how could they be better. Even if we don't personally intend to change them, we think about those things. We want to get to core to understand what we believe or what we should believe and how it impacts our actions, some of us more than others. And we all like that first look through a microscope. So one answer to the so what is because that's who we are. That's why we should take that entrepreneurial leap, each of us in our own way. For the second answer to the so what question, let's look through Steve Jobs' eyes. Steve Jobs said, what would it be like if every car was beige? It's interesting how he even posed the question. He didn't say, what would it be like if every sports car was red? What if every car was beige? Would it be so awful? Not really. I mean, we'd still have things to carry ourselves and all our crap around, right? We could still hail taxis and we could still do what we do, but the world would be static and boring and not very human and not very progressive and pretty darn beige. You don't have to wait for somebody, you don't have to wait very long for somebody to say, what if it was orange? Or what if it was green? That's who we are. So, and I think Steve Jobs had his finger on the pulse of that, and that's the second answer to so what. And here's the third answer. What if everybody in the world knew that they could question? What if everybody in the world was invited to question? What if when they did that, they really got down to what they believed was core and not necessarily what they were told? What if they continued to question and they challenged what was core? What if they all adopted a new way to look at things? What might happen? I don't know. I think we're still going to find out, at least this reference here to Egypt and to the Mideast. But let me leave you with this on this picture in your own answer to so what. The human soul on fire is the most powerful weapon in the world. Each of you has one of those too. Why wouldn't you light it on fire? You don't have to become an entrepreneur to do that. You don't have to start a venture to do that. You just have to take that entrepreneurial leap in your own way. What you're gaining here at Georgetown, whether you're here for the day as a guest, or you have been a student here, or are a student here, or you're a faculty member, it's fuel. It's tools, it's resources, it's opportunity, it's fuel for you to do something with. It's not turnkey. I read a quote the other day in the New York Times that I wanted to share with you. This quote is by Bill Kling, founder of American Public Media Group. He was reflecting on some of the ventures he's started, some of the ones he's invested in, some of the ventures he's seen and people he's seen start them. And he said, you know, what he's concluded is that the great leaders are people smart enough to gather all of the tools they can get and then gather all the tools you can get and then just tuck that away somewhere as extra fuel and follow your instincts. Think about the world today as you think about that quote. This world is changing faster than we've ever seen it change. It's changing in more ways than we've ever seen it change. And those changes are overlapping one another. If we approach things in a rote way, we can't possibly respond to the challenges or take advantage of the opportunities. We have to be flexible. It doesn't mean the tools are worthless, but it means ultimately we've got to have something else that steers us. He calls it following your instinct. I call it questioning, getting to core, seeing how you see things. You want to call that instinct or you want to call it your own guidelines, you call it whatever you want. You got to get to it to make something, no matter who you are, whether you want to start a venture or not. Whether you call yourself an entrepreneur or not, that's what counts. Here's how you do it. Question, get to core, relearn how to look. You don't have to do it this way, but this is one of the best ways to do it. And you can individualize it. You can do this any way you want. No formula, no how-to, just a suggestion. This is a place where you can take this entrepreneurial leap. This is where you are right now. You're at the front door of this place. And again, whether you're guest or student or faculty or alum or whatever, this is where you are today. This is not your final destination, no matter who you are. You want to get somewhere else. You're going to do it in your own way. All you have to be willing to do is take that leap. Enjoy the rest of the day, because Jeff and the Entrepreneurship Club and their teams have put together quite a few wonderful hours for you. Thank you very much for your attention.